Hi there, so this is now month 11 after I initially started going outside, and major piece of news. The place I was living in for 11 years I've now moved out of, so I've managed to secure myself a much cheaper house share, and so I'm lodging in a room. Now luckily I know the woman quite well because she's actually one of my neighbours, and we've basically spoken years, mostly about cats, because I owned a cat and she owned a cat, and it's just a common topic. And yeah, I've kind of known this person on and off for about, I'd say 9 years maybe. Probably about safe, but again, it's just to say hi over the wall, really. But I hit some financial problems this year simply because I was spending so much. One of the motivation tools I use to get out there into the world. Actually, it's not entirely true. The initial thing I had was going into shops. Shops were a scary, scary proposition, and whenever I went in there, sorry, whenever I went in there, it kind of felt like there was cotton wool in my brain, and I was wearing a very, very heavy backpack, sort of 50, 60 pounds almost. And it's not even that literal, it's just this entire pressure you kind of feel on top of your shoulders and head and everything else. It's quite hard to really explain the full sensation unless you've been through it yourself. But it's very almost like a waking dream. You're sort of wandering around, you're not in full control of everything, you're kind of internalizing everything, and you're very aware of your internal body functions, heart rate, how much blood pressure you feel, how hot your face is. That's typically what was going on in my head. And thus everything else around me was kind of hazy and fuzzy. So you're very, very focused on yourself when you're in a state of panic, your own feelings and sensations. And then when this external stimuli robs your attention from that, you're still aware of what's going on, and you're kind of multitasking on that person as well, and that's just taking even more brain power. Now, because I was in this state for, I mean, it did get easier over time, but the first 3 to 4 months, I felt like that every time I got to the shop, into a shop. I mean, it got gradually less and less and less as my confidence built. But those initial months when I went out, I was spending so much money because it was almost a case of go in there, grab whatever was on the shelf. Now, thinking back now, because I can do this quite confidently as a normal human being, but back then it was kind of like I was going to. I felt nervous about going into a shop and not buying anything. Was the long and short of it. Now, the only way I could get used to it was by going into that shop 3, 4, 5 times a day. And the closest shop to me is a Spar convenience store, and anyone who's been in a Spar will know that their prices are high, which is normal for street corner shops. But because it was the closest shop to me, that was the easiest one to get to and the easiest one to practice with. And what I would basically do is go in there when I'm hungry. Now, never shop when you're hungry. This is the first thing anyone knows who goes shopping. But I went in hungry anyway, because that was the primary motivation. It was a case of, oh, I need something to eat. I'll go grab a sandwich, crisps, and a drink. But actually, that's how organised it became afterwards. For the first few months, just reading prices was incredibly hard. Just focusing on something outside of my own feelings. It sounds incredibly self-absorbed, and it is. It really is. When you're in that state, you're just so aware of your own body, and you're so scared that you're going to go into a panic attack. Your legs are jelly, your heart is thumping away. It really is a ridiculous set of feelings, and I don't even feel a shadow of that now. But going out there initially was really, really difficult. Now, that was just a local shop. That was straight across the road. I'm talking no more than 10 meters away, which is why it was very useful, because I could just dash across the road, get something, come back. Never worked out that way because what would actually happen is I'd walk in there, pausing every so often. Now, one of the tricks I use for that is to get my mobile phone and pretend I was checking messages, so I didn't look like a ridiculous, insane person. Because that's one advantage of today, is everyone is checking their messages or making calls or whatever. So I had a phone that just every time I felt I couldn't go any further, I'd take out the phone, I would sort of swipe across it and just do this whole play act thing almost, and then when I felt ready to continue, I would move on. And it works because, as far as I'm aware, no one paid me much attention. I was just someone checking his messages. Might have been doing it frequently, but that just means I was receiving a lot of text messages, right? At least that's how I hope I came across. Certainly no one's ever said anything to me, and I've been a regular visitor for that shop for about a year now. So no one's called the loony police on me yet. But yeah, I would go into this shop and I would go around and initially just sort of buying a few items. I'd walk out there with far more than I intended. Now, I've always had a problem with crisps, and you can tell that I'm overweight, because crisps for a long time were my comfort food. And I would eat anything very high calorie and very fatty. And to be honest, that contributed a lot to my internal blood pressure and heart rate and all that kind of stuff as well, because salt and dehydrating yourself, and that does that. But again, when you're going through this, you don't really think along those lines. It's just, I feel this thing, I don't know why. It's very confusing. But yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing I was attracted to, and as a consequence, I did put on an awful lot of weight, combined with not being able to go outside, and depression and lack of exercise and all that kind of stuff, and basically everything conspired against me. Now, I'm not saying it's anyone else's fault other than my own, but it is very much a disease. Agoraphobia, depression, these things really do affect your ability to rationalize, make decisions. And that was the biggest thing, was going out there, I was not able to rationalize and make sensible decisions. And I would just go out there and buy crap, expensive crap at that, because even sitting there, even standing there and doing basic mathematics is quite hard. And the obsession was almost with, do I have enough money? Do I have enough money? Do I have enough money? So I was doing the mathematics. My concern wasn't with how much was I spending. It was how much, do I have the right amount to pay for this? If you see what I mean. So I wasn't thinking about long-term budgets or anything like that. I was just going out and taking the easiest way possible, which was go out, I've got this much money, this is how much I can spend, grab the food. And again, initially when I went in there, that was my panic. Obsessively counting change, obsessively checking my money, obsessively making sure I've got enough. Now, a far more sensible approach at the time would have been get something cheap. Doesn't matter what it is, pack of polos, whatever. Get something cheap. But the combination of being hungry, confused, not having done this in many, many years, not having anyone around me to control me, my habit for months was just spending too much and getting what I almost instinctively wanted. I knew I liked this sandwich, or I knew I liked this drink, or I knew I liked that. And there's this sort of... It's kind of a motivation thing where you go in there and you just get what you want, and that gives you a reward. Because previously, as an agoraphobic, as you go outside, it's the old carrot and stick. When you go outside, there's just stick. It's like you're hitting yourself constantly with a stick. You're generating thousands and hundreds of reasons why you should not be doing this. I might panic, I might embarrass myself, I might... Those are things that go through your mind in silly imaginings, and again, it sort of conspires against you. So one of the ways over that is a reward system, where you go in there and you get what you want, and that way you come back, you've had success, and you have a reward out of it. And that was very much the basis I worked on for many, many months. Now, unfortunately, doing this, especially 4, 5, 6 times a day, gets expensive. Because suddenly, without really, because each individual purchase, be it £5, £5 isn't a lot. No one really think that much of £5. Well, I would now, but back then that's what my reasoning was. But £5 5 times a day is £25, and on some bad days I could spend £10, because it isn't just food and that. They also sold other things like toothpaste and washing and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, washing up liquid, all that kind of stuff. And every time I needed something, I'll just go over there. And every time I wanted something, and that's the real crux of it. The fact is, I didn't need any of it. I could have gone out, got the basic groceries, sort of onions and things I can cook with, much, much cheaper. But I was going out buying the pre-prepared stuff, sort of the sandwich deal for £3, plus a pack of donuts. Which you can see why I'm overweight now. And then that's how it was. But you go out there, you spend £5, or spend £10, and sometimes it will go as high as £20 to £30. And again, I was not laying up on my frequency of going out there. So basically, my spending was completely out of control. Now, over time, I kind of spiraled, and it's hard to describe because it's kind of like waking up from a dream, where I was going outside and I was either one of two things: very, very anxious, or kind of serene and floating. And I know what it was. It was basically because I was stressing myself out so hard, that my nervous system was becoming very tired. And as my nervous system gets tired, you tend to sort of drift, and you don't always pay attention to the things you should be doing, especially not money. Now things got worse. I mean, that was just the spa. I was spending horrendous amounts of money just at the spa. Sort of £25 a day was possible. Times that by 5. You've got. He says hurriedly having to do mathematics in his head. Sorry, 25, 50, 100, 125, plus the weekend. Suddenly you're spending £175. Now again, that wasn't entirely the full picture. Sometimes the shops would be very low, but the average was about £5 a shop, I would say. And now thinking about it, it was a ridiculous amount of money to spend. But the thing is, I couldn't go into a shop without spending money because that made me nervous. The whole aspect of walking in there, buying something, and then leaving is fine, because that is an established procedure that I had set up. Go in there, browse what I want, stand in the queue, fret about standing in the queue. And that was often the worst part of the procedure, is just waiting in line with nothing to do but think. While you're in the aisles, you can... in order to stop obsessing on your internal functions, you very much obsess about what's going on around you, and that's when you buy the wrong things, basically. Then you just sort of stand in the queue, and then you obsess over your change, counting, which probably did make me seem quite weird. But then I'll just pay at the counter, normally perfect change, which was something I had to get myself out of, just learning that if they need more money, give them more money. If they don't have enough, that's fine. Just say you'll pop over to the flat, grab some more, come back. Because it was so close, that really wasn't an issue. But I didn't really get into doing that until about month 4 or 5. Unfortunately, I didn't document this very well, so this is very much relying on my memory. But this is 4 to 5 months into going out, and I still was obsessing over small change in things. Now, my range was gradually improving over time, and of course the worst thing about that is suddenly, instead of one shop that you're spending too much money in, there's loads of shops you're spending too much money in. And this in many ways is why you need someone around to keep you in control. Now, the long and short of all this is I got myself in a great deal of money trouble, because I wasn't paying bills, I wasn't paying rent, I wasn't paying all the things I should be doing, and I racked up in about a year another £5 of debt, just in not paying bills and things. Now, it's not an insurmountable odds. I actually have enough money to pay all this off, and now I'm getting myself sorted. I'm actually confident. It's fine. But that long story is basically the reason that I lost the flat. So they gave me an eviction notice because I just wasn't paying rent. Again, stupid thing. Now, it kind of works out in my advantage because I would never have moved. That's the long and short of it. I was there for 11 years. It was my place of safety. I would always go out and I would come back, and that was my place. And the idea of moving. Now, I've forced myself indirectly to panic and have to search for other places and all this kind of stuff. Now, luckily, my neighbour took pity on me and she's given me very good rates. She's making money. I've seen to that. I'm gonna be very careful not to impose, but it does bring my costs down because it's a house share. It's sharing bills and fixed level rent, all that kind of stuff. So financially, it works out a lot better, and it frees up hundreds of pounds. Because luckily, I do run a small business, so I am bringing in some income. Um, but it frees up basically enough for me to pay off all my debt in about a year's time. So it's going to be quite symmetrical almost, because I spent a year getting myself in debt, and with a bit of luck, I'll spend a year getting myself out of debt again. But it has forced me to take the next step, which is leave that place for good. Now I'm going back and forth, moving my stuff over, but right now, as of this moment, this is the first day where I've moved house. I'm in someone else's space. I'm around. She's out at work all day, and she's here in the evenings. Now, my fear was this is the sort of weird thing I sort of built up again, was people in the evening. Now, in the past, in the evening, I was absolutely shattered because I'd been in panic attacks all day, and my nervous system was shattered, and any small thing could set me off in the evening and basically mean that I don't get the sleep I need to regenerate myself. So I used to be terrified about being around people while I was tired, because when you're tired, you have even less control over yourself. And when you consider that when I was wide awake and functional, so to speak, I was having massive anxiety attacks while I was so-called rested. You can imagine what I was like when I was tired and overtired, and it just got so much worse. And some of the feelings and sensations that I went through were beyond description, almost drug induced. I imagine it being kind of like a really bad LSD episode. It probably isn't like that because I've never taken drugs in my life, but it's that kind of blurry images and confused fuddleness and series of logical thoughts that when anyone else looks at them just aren't logical. It's just a really scrambled way of being. But the fact is, despite all that, I've grown in confidence and strength enough, because I'm not having panic attacks anymore. That's the long and short of it. Once those stopped, they stopped, and that was the biggest turning point. But the trouble is, once you've been through that many anxiety attacks so frequently, so often, you're programmed to expect them. And you do everything in your power to avoid going into or feeling that way again. And that's really what the last few years have been about, was me no longer panicking and no longer having to be in that mindset and deprogramming myself of those responses. But the fact is, I'm in someone else's house. I've moved in, renting a room upstairs. I've got access to shared facilities, all the sort of usual stuff. Got a great rate on the place. And I've moved all my equipment in, so I'm now working from here. I slept here for the first time the night before last, which was quite nice for me because I was very anxious about sleeping in another building with another human being. And when I say very anxious, I don't mean very anxious, I mean a little bit nervous. But again, I'm programmed almost to go from a little bit nervous and sort of work out how I can get all the way up to an anxiety attack. But the long and short of it is she had a meeting, so she wasn't here for the night, which was very good for me because it gave me a chance to get used to this place and just potter around and do my usual routine. Without having to worry about someone else. Then she was here last night and it was fine. I went to sleep absolutely perfect. Got a good night's sleep, woke up again, all my fears completely unjustified, and now, as you can see this morning, I'm feeling relatively good about it. and that's basically it. So I have moved out of my prison for 11 years into another location. I'm working. I'm still going back over there. I've got to clean the place out, empty it all out, get rid of washing machines and freezers and all that kind of stuff, and just very much compact 11 years of absolute crap. Because unfortunately, I did have access to ordering online, so there's loads of books and toys and all sorts of things over there. But I now need to sort of expand. Sorry, I now need to contract what is basically one, two, three, four, five, a five-room flat, which is quite sizable actually. I was quite lucky that I was trapped in there because I did have quite a lot of space in many ways. If it had been any less, it may have taken me longer to recover. But luckily, I had the space there to sort of. I mean, this is a funny thing. I mean, my agoraphobia is so bad that even going into another room was problematic. When I was there initially, I had one room, and it took me years just to expand out into other rooms. It was that bad. And even then, I would be sitting there in another room, and if I had cleaned that room suddenly, and there was all this change around me, I couldn't be in there. I had to go through the whole process of reacclimatizing again. That's how bad I was. And yeah, so so yeah, I mean, those in many ways I've always been fighting the agoraphobia in ways I haven't even realised, simply by expanding my territory and learning to cope with change more than anything else. Now these days I'm fine. If you clean a room, I'll just sit in there and I won't think about it, and that's the key, not thinking about it. Now if I did go back to thinking about it, I can feel all those little anxieties and things building up again. But it's learning to ignore that kind of silly stuff that really doesn't benefit you or anyone in any way. But despite all that, within the matter of, I would say, well, Monday was the official day I moved in. It's now Friday, so within a week, I feel very much at home here. She's been very kind. She's made me feel at home. There's been a few little rubs. She likes things in a certain way, so which is good for me as well, because it means I've got to clean, I've got to tidy up after myself, which is another bad habit I got into, was just piling up stuff, plates and packaging and all this kind of stuff, just not cleaning up after myself. Now I'm forced into a situation where I have to respect another person's space. We have to respect the living spaces. Our own rooms are our own affair. That's the general rule at the moment. But even then, it's her house. I have to make sure that I tidy everything up. And this is a good thing, because I'm now in that mindset. It's a totally different way of thinking to this sort of almost, oh, I've finished eating, just bung the bowl over there, type away on the computer. Which is, again, the habit I developed. Mostly because initially going from the living room to wash up something in the kitchen was quite difficult, because again it was another room. I was having agoraphobic responses just in these rooms, sort of thing. So yeah, that's how it was. But as I say, now the biggest highlight now is that I have moved out. I'm in a different place, totally different new set of rules. Pretty comfortable. There are going to be minor twinges. Confrontation is going to be my biggest thing. I mean, I do look like a big scary bloke to many people. Sort of deep voice and sort of standing there with my arms crossed, just not saying anything while panicking inside the entire time. But you know, she sort of says something she doesn't like. I acknowledge it. I don't do it. It's that simple, and I don't need to be any more complicated than that. And as I need to do things, I will do them. So you know, there has to be a balance in these things. Yeah. But that's it basically, month 11, and I am out of that flat for good. I will be going back there, sorting things out, bringing over what I want. For example, I have a signed copy of Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett, who is my favourite author ever. That is definitely coming over with me. I have my father's stamp collection. I have a telescope that my uncle gave to me. So these sort of things have to come over, but pretty much everything else is just going to go It's just going to go and skip. So yeah, that's it. So that's the latest update. Sorry for rambling on so much, but that's how things stand right now. And for anyone who is also suffering with agoraphobia, feel free to leave comments if you have any questions. I'm more than willing to answer them. I have another story that I'm planning to tell you relatively soon. I'll sit down and tell you about that. I've got to go off and do some work now, but I'll make another video sometime next week discussing another reason that I was able to overcome agoraphobia, and hopefully some of you are gleaning something from these stories. And as I make mistakes, for instance spending was out of control, that was a huge mistake I made. Luckily it's not unrecoverable. I'm not sitting here with tens of thousands of pounds of debt, but that constant drain on my finances and what I was doing wasn't very sensible. Though in an indirect way it has led to a good thing, which is getting out of that place. So for anyone else who has agoraphobia, best of luck. It won't last forever, not if you don't want it to, especially if you don't want it to. Just go easy on yourself, try and relax, which is the ultimate key to all of this, and try and have some fun in your life. It's the best thing. Well, it's the best advice anyone can give you, really. Just try and relax and have some fun, and if you can't, pretend. So anyway, Daniel Foreman signing off.